All of us are subject to certain behavioral biases, whether we like it or not. In fact, um, chances are that the more noise you hear, the more subject you are to those biases. We'll talk about some of them in a fair amount of detail because the first step, as they say, is to identify what a problem is before you start trying to fix it. Join me to talk about behavioral biases and the impact that can have on your finances is Amit Kukreja, who is the founder of Amit Kukreja Advisory. Thank you so much, Amit, as always, for taking the time. I would like to run our viewers through the list of biases that you've selected. Because of the time that we have, we are discussing 5. There are more than that. But we're going to talk about familiarity bias, we're talking about loss aversion, we're talking about herd mentality, recency bias, and finally, not necessarily a bias, but something that a lot of us have to contend with, which is choice paralysis. But let's talk about biases in general first, and then let's talk about familiarity bias. In your conversations with people, do you have to constantly struggle to make them aware of these biases? And how does familiarity bias work?
Yeah, I mean, if you are investing and you feel that you have the wisdom to do it all by yourself, we as human beings all have some prejudices, some kind of natural inclination towards a particular behavior that sometimes we don't even acknowledge, that sometimes we don't, it's so default in our behavior that with these prints or imprints inside, we end up taking wrong decisions. So these biases could be two in nature: cognitive bias or an emotional bias. Cognitive bias is where the logic makes you conclude something that may be flawed. It's conceptual, it's logical. Emotional bias is more on the right brain stuff, which is something which is driven by the emotion that you have, right? So the left brain biases, which is cognitive bias, or the right brain biases, which is emotional bias. If you have a set of biases which could be either or driven, then you might end up having flawed financial decisions, which could be hurting your portfolio growth, which could also be depriving you from your path of reaching a very fulfilling life goal or a path of reaching your financial goal. So familiarity biases is one of the emotional bias. It's not a cognitive bias. It is just that emotionally you are comfortable with something because you have had that experience, because you felt the outcome of that experience was something that suited you and that kept you happy or that kept you neutral and calm, you continue to choose the same familiarity stuff, and hence you move away from taking risk in your portfolio, or you move away from having a risk adjusted returns in your portfolio. So familiarity bias is an emotional bias where you are in your comfort zone. You are either in favor of something that may happen continuously, or you are in favor of, or you are against something that may have happened continuously, but you are completely missing out an opportunity where the contrary outcome may also happen because of your lack of understanding. I hope that
No, you
helps.
have. You have definitely highlighted an important point. You're in a comfort zone, so to speak. You're not willing to move past that, and so you're probably missing out on something that could make your life better. Let's also talk about loss aversion. And this, I think, is something that most of us have to contend with because you see in certain situations your portfolio melting and you struggle with dealing with that because you're not able to take it.
Yeah, yeah. Loss aversion is yet another emotional bias where we all are scared of losses. And loss aversion can be a very deep rooted bias because it is not your personal experience which could have caused it. It could be your childhood experience where you witnessed, you saw something in your parents or somebody that you were very attached to, and and the person ended up having losses that led to some deeper imprint in your mind about losses, and you might completely be averse to losses throughout your life. So loss aversion is a very commonly found bias in women in our country, particularly the ladies who are not comfortable with financial affairs, who are not into financial planning. They are always in the capital protection mode. They don't like losses. In general, they are nurturers. Whatever they have, they want to maintain that and keep it. for the difficult times and very slowly, steadily grow it. So loss aversion is again yet another emotional bias. What do you need to do to overcome this bias is to make sure that there are risk adjusted returns. So with a little bit of risk, you might have a much bigger returns, and you might have returns which are better than the conservative approach that you might adopt because of the loss aversion bias that you have.
Understanding the risk involved is absolutely important. As they say, it's two sides of the same coin, right? You have risk and return. Let's talk about herd mentality, and this is something that is also very common. You see this across the board. I don't think you can say it's just here in India. I think you can say it's true for quite a few specimens that we've seen, or instances that we've seen in history, right? If you talk about the dot-com bubble, you talk about tulip mania, all of these things come to mind, right?
Yeah. Herd mentality is a cognitive bias. Herd mentality is a logic left brain bias where you are taking decisions because others have taken it. You think, I don't have to go through the risky path. If somebody has already gone through the risky path, he has understood the risk, then I may just follow suit and make sure that I am also having a better returns from that particular portfolio. So herd mentality is just following. And sometimes it is the lack of information, lack of your initiative, lack of your willingness to work hard. And also sometimes it is just, you don't have the bandwidth. There's no time. So I would rather do something that others are doing and hope that I would get the similar set of returns or better than that. It is also sometimes because of the fact that I do not want to invest money or incur cost of investments. So I want to minimize my cost. I don't want to do the research. I don't want to hire an expert and pay him the money. I would rather speak to my friend, a family person, or a distant cousin or spouse's relative and gather the information and just do it all by myself. So I may attempt to minimize the cost in my herd mentality also. Look at crypto, what's happening in the crypto world. Everybody got into crypto despite knowing that there is no regulator in crypto. People invested in crypto. And look at the crash that happened in a couple of big ticket cryptos which were operating last week. We had a crash up to 95%. So people who were just following herd mentality, invest in crypto because you get 10x or 20x or 50x within 6 months, are now bearing the outcome or an adverse consequence of herd mentality.
Point. The next one is particularly important in the current context because recency bias comes to mind when there is a significant crash or a significant boom in the equity markets. And I would like you to talk about it. Let me not say more. What is this about?
Recency bias is something that has recently happened. You believe that it will continue to happen. So recency is the normal. Recency is the permanence. Recency is what it is and it will always be. Look at the bull market that we have had since COVID. Look at the participation by the retail investors that we have had since COVID. It is all recency bias. Everybody is now thinking that the returns we have had in the capital markets, particularly on the equity side in last 2 years, is the norm, is the status quo, is continuing to be exactly the way going forward. Hence, you will see a lot of retail participation happening in the mutual fund world. People have started investing money in equity and they're hoping and they're also kind of anticipating, which is much subdued and a normal thing than a hope that the numbers, the CAGR would stay like this. So this is recency bias. What you need to do is ensure that your facts that you are studying are based on a longer duration, a longer period where you have gone through the ups and downs. Academically, you have gone through the ups and downs of understanding the graphs and the features and the returns, and then you base your decision rather than the recent facts or the recent parameters that you're looking at.
The sad part, Amit, is that by and large, and this is the case globally, is that retail investors tend to be the last on the bus on the way up and the last off the bus on the way down. And this is, I think, a parameter that is viewed by a lot of institutional investors as well, that if there is a significant crash and if there is a large amount of retail participation in that crash, then perhaps we're nearing the end of the down cycle. But, conversation, I guess, for another day. Choice paralysis is the last one that you've identified. What is this about?
Choice paralysis is your cognitive state where you are not able to take a decision. You have analyzed something so well and you have gathered so many choices that it is becoming difficult for you to make up your mind what to do, where to invest money, or what decision to take. So when you have too much options and when you have too much data to go through, then sometimes it could be a very difficult decision to decide to put your money in. So the best way to crack this nut of choice paralysis is to look at what is the financial goal that you're trying to address. Look at what exactly is the purpose of this money that you're trying to invest. When do you need the money back? What are the tax implications? What is the most conservative return? What is the most high risk exposure return if I were to put this money for that particular duration? So if we have too many choices, just based on your risk appetite, duration of the or the time window that you have at hand before you need the money back, the kind of risk you can take, the kind of market volatility the product can go through, based on those facts, make your decisions. And if you're finding too many options coming despite applying your filter, then apply few more filters and you gradually will narrow down to a very restricted set of one or two choices which will fit your investment decision, and you can then free yourself from the choice paralysis problem that you're facing.
Amit, we've spoken about these biases, and I think, as they say, the knowledge of a problem is half the battle won in overcoming that problem. But there has to be more that you can do to avoid these biases. You've mentioned a few solutions to those problems, but what more can an individual do?
Oh, you can apply a solid internal self-assessment process when you make these decisions to ensure that your biases are not coming in the way when you're making your investment decisions. So first of all, acknowledge what's your bias. What are the biases that could be impacting you? Then look at what is happening in the outside world. What is the market's state? What the market has shown in terms of volatility? What the particular product has shown in terms of returns over a period of 3 year, 5 year, 8 years. So study the market, study the options that you have. Then look at your financial goals. So one, look at your own biases. Second, look at the markets. Third, look at your own financial goals, understand them. What is it that matters to you about fulfilling this goal? Is it the time? Is it the risk? Is it the inflation? Is it the tax efficiency? Is it the combination of all four? So look at your financial goals, analyze what exactly do you need. Then go through the investment strategy, mapping your products which are available in the market for which you have done the planning on analyzing your financial goals. And after having understood your own biases, now map the products and biases and the external options that you have and your own portfolios, and then create your own portfolio strategy and then get started. You may have to go through a couple of iterations. This might not be one solution for all your life stage problems, but this would definitely be an approach better than the previous approach. So you have to keep jotting down notes about how each investment strategy is playing out for you with the changing parameters. So you have 5 broad variables. Let me just recap. Your own set of biases, the market performance, what's happening in the market, the products or the selection of products, your own financial goals that need to be taken care of, and lastly, the investment strategy that you need to make in order to make these decisions successfully. And one more, keep making notes about your investment strategy and how the investments outcomes are playing out in terms of helping you reach your financial goals faster.
Fantastic.
And then you will see that you will conquer the bias problems.
Thank you so much, Amit, for that detailed analysis, and I'm sure that a lot of our viewers have already benefited from that. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.